Chapter 3. An Opportunity for Pip. I always knew I would be apprenticed to Joe as soon as I was old enough, and so I used to spend most of the day helping him in the forge. However, I also attended the village evening school, which was organised by an ancient relation of Mr. Wopsle's. Her teaching mostly consisted of falling asleep while we children fought each other. But Mr. Wopsle's young cousin, Biddy, tried to keep us under control and teach us to read, write and count. Mr. Wopsle examined us every 3 months. In fact, he did not ask us any questions at all, but read aloud from Shakespeare, waving his arms dramatically and enjoying the sound of his own voice. One night, about a year after the escaped convicts had been caught, I was sitting by the kitchen fire, writing a letter to Joe. I didn't need to, because he was sitting right next to me, but I wanted to practice my writing. After an hour or two of hard work, I passed this letter to him. My dear Joe, I hope you are well. Soon I can teach you what I have learnt. What fun, Joe. Love, Pip.
Pip, old boy,
cried Joe, opening his kind blue eyes very wide.
What a lot you've learnt. Here's a J and an O. That's for Joe, isn't it, Pip?
I wondered whether I would have to teach Joe from the beginning, so I asked, How do you write Gargery, Joe?
I don't write it at all, said Joe. But you know, I am fond of reading. Give me a good book or newspaper, a good fire, and I ask no more. Well, when you come to a J and an O, how interesting reading is.
Didn't you ever go to school, Joe, when you were young?
No, Pep. You see, my father drank a lot, and when he drank, he used to hit my mother, and me too sometimes. So she and I ran away from him several times, and she used to say, Now, Joe, you can go to school. But my father had such a good heart that he didn't want to be without us, so he always came to find us and took us home and hit us. So you see, Pip, I never learnt much.
Poor Joe.
But remember, Pip, my father had a good heart.
I wondered about that, but said nothing.
He let me become a blacksmith, which was his job too, only he never worked at it. I earned the money for the family until he died. And listen to this, Pip. I wanted to put this on his gravestone. Whatever the fault he had from the start, remember, reader, he had a good heart.
Did you invent that yourself, Joe? I asked, surprised.
I did, said Joe proudly. It came to me in a moment, from my own head. But, Pep, sad to say, there wasn't enough money for the gravestone. My poor mother needed it. In bad health she was. She died soon after. Found peace at last.
Joe's blue eyes were watery.
I was lonely then, and I met your sister. Now, Pep.
Joe looked firmly at me, because he knew I was not going to agree with him.
Your sister is a fine woman.
I could think of nothing better to say than,
I'm glad you think so, Joe. So am I, said Joe. I'm glad I think so. Very kind of her, bringing you up by hand. Such a tiny baby you were. So when I offered to marry your sister, I said, And bring the poor little child to live with us. There's room for him at the forge.
I put my arms round Joe's neck and cried into his shirt.
Don't cry, old boy, he said. Always the best of friends, you and me.
As I dried my tears, he continued,
"So here we are, Pip. Now if you teach me a bit, and I warn you now that I'm very stupid, Mrs. Joe must never know. And why? Because she likes to be in charge, you know, giving the orders."
"Joe," I asked, "why don't you ever rebel?"
"Well," said Joe, "to start with, your sister's clever, and I'm not. And another thing, and this is serious, old boy, when I think of my poor mother's hard life, I'm afraid of not behaving right to a woman. So I'd much rather seem a bit weak with Mrs. Joe than shout at her, or hurt her, or hit her. I'm just sorry she scolds you as well, Pep, and hits you with the stick. I wish I could take all the scolding myself. But there it is, Pep."